Hello and welcome to this lesson where we start to look at some more debugging tools in Excel VBA. Now, something you are sure to get in your code are bugs. Everybody gets them from making simple typing mistakes or errors in the logic of your code. Now, during this course, you've seen me use the locals window, which personally I'm a big fan of and tend to use a lot. And we've also seen stepping through the code by pressing the F8 key and moving through each bit of our code looking for mistakes or understand how it works. Plan of this video is to check out a few other debugging tools that we have not yet covered. So in this code we've got on our screen, which is our stock sheet macro still. So it's just following on from the nested loops tutorial. We have two errors. I've got an error here where it should say I equals I plus 1. I've got it plusing 2 on the loop. And on our spreadsheet itself, I have a typing mistake by a user. In the delivery, somebody has managed to press the Y key by mistake, so that data is coming as text. And as the plan is for it to add the delivery on top of Mango, it's not going to add text. So that will be an issue. So let's go back to our code. And the first debugging tool I wanted to mention is setting breakpoints. Now, breakpoints can be set in a few different ways. And the idea of setting breakpoints is really for if you've got quite a large macro, especially if you've got a large macro. And we can set a point that our code breaks when we play it. So rather than stepping through every single line from the beginning using F8, I could, for example, if I wanted to break at this point here, the beginning of the loop, shoot through this initial part where we do some assigning and some calculating. We start the first loop and assign things to variables and select a sheet. Stop here. One way I can do that is click in this left hand margin, and by clicking there you get this kind of white font on red background. That is a breakpoint. I can remove that breakpoint by hitting the red circle. I can also do it by clicking anywhere within that line and pressing the F9 key on the keyboard. So F8 to step through, F9 to toggle on and toggle off breakpoints. And these can be found from the debug menu as well. Toggle breakpoint F9. So let me turn that back on. And you can set multiple breakpoints. So I could maybe set another breakpoint here for the else if. Maybe once you've stopped there, I need to check my code. I might have a look over the variables, see how we're working. Then play it again and stop it back here, so I can check things out again. So I just gave that a go. If I hit my play button, we'll see it jump to this bit of code. At which point I can do as I wish. I can hover over, keep searching equals true. Row num is 3. I can see what's going on. Hit play again. It shoots the next part. So rather than stepping through every line, so right, shoot here, and I'll double check it again. Row num still equals 3, and so on. So they are your breakpoints. I'm just going to reset my code. I'm going to press my stop button to come out of that break mode. And I'm going to remove my breakpoints. So you're setting breakpoints, similar to a stepping through, but you've got maybe a faster way of doing it. If you need to jump to a particular part of your code, they will allow you to do that. Let's start focusing on the actual errors that we do have here. And if I just played my code right now, I receive a runtime error. So we saw earlier in this course there are different types of error you can get. This is a runtime error, error 13, type mismatch. And if I click debug, which is a debugging tool in its own right, it's taking me to what it believes is my first issue. Now I'm only saying that that he can't assign cells I1 to item ID. Now this mistake at the moment, if I move back to my sheets, is that I'm on the inventory sheet when I hit play. I'm on the inventory sheet. I should have been on update when I played this. Now in reality that's not going to happen, because the update sheet is where the button is. And if people are running it from this button, we do not have a problem. It's just because I'm running it through play and I was on the wrong sheet. And it didn't accept the mismatch of, what was it trying to do? It was the third row, was it? I'm not even sure what I was on. Row num I equals 2. Yeah, he was looking at text. Okay, let's reset that. Let's double check I'm on the right sheet this time. Update. Let's look at playing it again. Must be good now. Another one. Same error message. Runtime error 13. Type mismatch. Let's debug this time. And now we're on a different variable assignment. So now we've got to check out what's wrong with this one. Now if I hover over the delivery variable, let's get on the right one, it says it equals to 40. So delivery equals to 40. And if I have a look at my sheet, tell you what, let's restore this window. That might make our life easier. 40 is for blueberries. So the delivery variable still contains the value for blueberries. Okay, no problems there. Let's try and figure out what's going wrong with this. What does product name say? That says mangoes. So the previous variables are storing data for mangoes, but delivery still has 40. So they've still got a previous one. The issue is that it couldn't assign this. I guess looking at this now, it's quite clear that it had trouble with that text. But we can also see that it seems to be missing out oranges, because the previous one for delivery was 40, so it seems to have skipped oranges there. What I was going to use the immediate window to try and help us figure out what's going on here as well. It's a demonstration of what that can do. We can display the immediate window by using the shortcut Control G, or by going to View and choosing the immediate window. An immediate window allows you to type code in there, so you can see what the answer to your code might be before you actually put it within your macro. So you can test out logic and check assignments to variables and all this kind of stuff. So for example, if I wanted to check out what I has, the variable I, which is the one that is tracking our external loop, the one on this sheet. And as you saw, I don't know if you noticed that a second ago, if I hover over I on the code, and we've seen this already in the course, it actually tells me I equals 4. So I don't need the immediate window for this, but it is, it will allow me to do a job. And in the immediate window, I can do this by using $I. So I'll put a question mark before the variable name, pressing enter tells me that contains 4 at the moment. Useful, I guess, if your code is large, you don't want to scroll to the instance set variable to hover over it. Some people swear by use of the immediate window. They love it. If I'm honest, I don't use it as much myself. But hopefully we're seeing the benefits of just some of what it can do at the moment. So that tells me it's 4. It's looking at row 4. This gives a good idea as to the fact it's missed out oranges. Maybe I'm not quite sure why at the moment. Obviously we know why, because I mentioned it before, but maybe we're not quite sure why. But it's given us a good idea and putting us in the right direction. Let's say I can't see this sheet in the background, and I want to know why there's a type mismatch. What I can also do in the immediate window is use debug.print. It's one of the main reasons people use it in my experience. I can print information to the immediate window, debug.print. And I'm going to print cells I, 3 dot value. So I'm printing the contents of what I'm trying to assign to delivery there. So that will print Y78, which we can see in the background, and hopefully gives away the issue here, that is a text entry, and that is why we have a mismatch. Delivery variable only stores integer values. Now, you know, we spoke about variables earlier in this course, and if you don't specify a data type, you know, not quite as easier to debug. This is what we're talking about. If you don't specify a data type, it will have the data type of variant, which is very useful, but not right now because our variable would have just accepted that. But okay, yeah, that I'm happy with that, and then it wouldn't have been able to use the formula because it is text. So this, in some way, helps us troubleshoot this kind of stuff. Okay, so that's a couple of examples what the immediate window can do for us, and hopefully bringing that error to our attention. I'm going to close this immediate window down now. I should mention, you see I've got it hovering. It would normally appear at the bottom like your locals window does. It's just something that you see people do a lot, and I've done here. It's just to drag it round so that you can type next to your code. I'm going to close that down. I'm going to reset my my macro, and I'm going to change it in the background here. Let's put 78 over the top there. Let's correct that. That is fine. Now we know we've still got the other issue, which is this one here, which we kind of saw there as well, that it had I equals 4, so it seemed to jump. Maybe if you're not quite sure why, let's work on that theory, why it was 4 and it doesn't seem to be doing it for each one. I was going to use the watch window as an example of troubleshooting this one. Now yes, the locals window could do it. Yes, we could hover over I as we're in break mode and running through, and that might help us troubleshoot it. There are other ways, and you're going to find your own way of doing this stuff, your own tools you like to use, and your own way of writing to a degree. There is a universal kind of standard as well. But here we're going to look at the watch window. So once again, no surprise really, the view menu is where we bring in this one called the watch window. And the watch window is where we can choose what variables and expressions we track. So whereas things like the locals window shows all of them, and this code's not that big, but I've got, 7 variables. You know, there might be a lot to track down there, especially with object variables. So the watch window allows you to choose which ones to track. Now I've got the watch window down the bottom, just like locals and the immediate would do by default. I'm going to right mouse click anywhere in that watch window and look at adding a watch, which we can also do from the debug menu. And one thing I'm going to add watch for is I'm going to add watch for row num. So one of the variables we've got is row num. This keeps track of the row number on the inventory sheet as we move through. So I'm going to watch that expression down there. Just pick and choosing the ones I want to keep track of. So I'm going to click OK. And at the bottom it shows down there row num. It doesn't have any information about it as yet. Now I'm going to go and add a second watch, which is the one I really care about here, which is I. The one that tracks the row number on the exterior loop or the update sheet. And for this one, I'm going to ask it to break when value changes. So what this is going to allow us to do, and it's kind of similar to our breakpoints now in a way, but a little bit more intelligent in this example, is when I play my code, it's going to stop every time I changes. So in this case, it's going to stop every time it has to move through a different product here. It's a little bit more intelligent than breakpoints can do, and you just choose a statement in your code, a line in your code. So a very cool option of the watch window. It's one of the main reasons I come here, I think, if I'm going to use it. Which is a big if, once again. I'm not saying I use this kind of stuff a huge amount myself. It's mainly if I'm writing very large codes I'm finding difficult to track. So I'm going to say break when value changes. I'll click OK. I appears at the bottom, Not much to see down there, slightly different icon. So what we'll do, let's have a look. I'm going to hit my play button. I'm on my update sheet. Just hit my play button. Right, it's stopped here first of all. And it's because I has changed. We've done the I = 2. So the initial assignment there, I can see I = 2 in my watch window. Integer data type. Row number = 0 and is a long data type. Let's hit play again. Now we're down here because it's the next instance where I changes. So now it's telling me I = 4. Row num is 11. So it's allowing me to track both of them, anything that I want to watch. But this break when value changes allow me to check each instance of I. So I've only clicked it, well, I've clicked it twice, but let's say I've clicked it once, ignoring the initial assignment. So I know that the next one should be 3. Ready? I want to look at each one in the update sheet here. Should go boom, 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 next row. But it's not. It's gone from 2 to 4. So it's helping me track what's happening. It's also taking me to the exact part of the code. So I can immediately see the issue as well in both areas. So I know that what I'm looking at doing is changing it to 1. For some reason, it's incrementing 1 too many times. Maybe I've got my variables confused, or it's a typo. 2 is next to 1 on the keyboard. It can happen. So I can change that there now. Reset my code. Come out of my break mode. I can always give that another go with the hope that it's doing its job. Bear in mind that when we're running this code though as well, it is changing values. So I'm sure I've mentioned this on the course already, but you'll be doing this on a sample, you won't be doing it on a real thing. But it did run through the loop once there, so it has added 40 onto the blueberries value. So just wanted to quickly mention that to make sure that we are happy that when I do things like press that stop button to reset, part of my code has already run. Something may have changed as an instance of that. Okay, both errors are fixed. This should now work a dream with my 3 stock items. I'm going to hit my button. What have I got? I've still got my watch window. Right, let's turn off our watches. Let's use my reset. And we can do this among other ways. Got a debug menu for this stuff as well. Not a big menu user. Right click, delete watch. Though I'm not really causing an issue there. I is right click, delete watch. Let's get rid of that watch window as well. Let's get out of here. Boom. Done. Macro works fine. Macro has been debugged. Let's click OK. And not that we'd really notice, I guess. My notice blueberries has gone up twice now because of the initial error of the watch window still. And I don't know if you noticed the other ones went up as well, if you saw what values they were. But the fact they're cleared from here in the message box gives away the functionality. So this lesson was just looking at a few other debugging tools, namely breakpoints, the watch window, and the immediate window. Just other tools at a disposal for helping to fix bugs in their code. Hello and welcome to this lesson where we start to look at error trapping in Excel VBA. And in our first look at the onError object, we're going to look at the onError resume next statement. And for our example, or one of our examples of error trapping here, the scenario on this inventory list that we've been using is that the inventory sheet name has been renamed. Somebody somehow has removed the O from the word inventory, so it's no longer, the sheet is no longer spelt correctly. So if I was to run our sub procedure from our button on the update sheet, we now receive a runtime error. Subscript out of range, as it cannot recognize the name of the sheet anymore. Runtime error 9. Now if I click the debug button, it takes me into my editor and it reminds us maybe of the line that's causing the problem here, as it's trying to activate a sheet called inventory, of which it cannot find. So this is one of the problems that we're going to look at dealing with, or handling is the name you generally hear, over these next few videos. And in this example, we're going to look at the on error resume next, which in this example is not really a good idea, and we're going to see that. But using on error resume next is a bit like the if error function in Excel. It's a way of basically hiding errors. So you're saying that, look, I'm really comfortable with my procedure. If an error occurs, it's not a real error. It works all right, just to kind of close it down and carry on. That sort of idea. So, yeah, in this example, not a good idea. If you can't select the inventory sheet, then what chance have you got? How could you look for something on it? So not a wise move. But you will see this statement, probably overused to be honest, but you will see this in people's code, and you may find a need to use it yourself. It's not completely redundant, but we're going to look at better ways of handling this. Now, this on error resume next statement you will typically see quite early in somebody's code, either just before or after the variable initializations, the initial ones. Let's put it before. I'm just going to write the words on error resume next. So 4 different words, on error resume next. If I press enter, I can see they all go blue. They're all keywords. And rather than play this code, what I want to look at doing is maybe to move through the code so that we can see what is going on. So let's do just that. If I click somewhere in my code, and what is the first one we're looking for? Blueberries. Blueberries would be the bottom one, wouldn't it? Okay, let's have a look. Let's F8, and I'll start stepping through. So on error, resume next. Now it knows to avoid error messages. I equals 2, count how many stock there are, and enter the loop. Assign the variables, this all works fantastic. Select the inventory sheet. It's not going to be able to do this. And pass till it goes. And notice it did not activate the sheet. So on error resume next, I said, look, don't show any errors. Just carry on, go for it. So now, because that wasn't successful, but it's carrying on anyway, this loop is going to happen on the update sheet. So we'll loop inside here. So row num equals 3. So what it's actually doing now is it's looking for blueberries, 1011, but it's looking for it starting from here, A3 on the update sheet. So there will be no success. When it looks at mangoes, there will be no success. And it will end up adding blueberries at the bottom. So let's have a look at this. No success, around you go. No success, around you go. Here we go. Are you a match? No. Are you empty? Yes, you are. And it just starts adding in blueberries to the bottom of this list. So, not a good idea. I should just put a date over here as well. Not a good idea in this example using on error resume next. But it's just to see what it does. It was to show that it prevented an error from showing, which does have its uses. But in this example, not quite good enough, and probably overused out there. I mean, I used a bad example just to demonstrate that you've really got to be careful when using stuff like that. So it just tends to get overused, in my opinion, in kind of VBA kind of environment. But yes, it certainly has its uses. But let's go and have a look at some better examples of how we can handle this error. Hello and welcome to this lesson on error trapping in Excel VBA, where we're going to start to look at actually creating error handlers in our VBA code to actually handle an error and do a different action instead, whether it's to exit a procedure or run a different line of code, but to perform a different action if an error occurs. So we've got the same error as the previous video with this inventory mistake on the sheet name. But now if we jump into our editor, what we're going to do this time is just before the sheet reference, where we've got worksheets inventory.activate, we're going to say that on an error message, we want to divert them to a different part of our code that will be set up for handling errors, commonly referred to as the error handler. So just before worksheets inventory.activate, I'm going to write on error, and I'm going to use go to, and I'm going to write the error handler. So that the word error handler there is not important. You can call that whatever you like. You can call it Jim Smith. You could be more specific and say worksheet name problem. Now you can call it whatever you like. These words obviously have to be specific. On error go to, and it's just a name of the section of our code, which at the moment does not exist, but we're going to create it right now. Just before we do that, I mean, this line doesn't have to go directly before that reference. As long as it's before it, that's okay. This is just turning on the error handler. So as long as we turn it on before we use it, that would make sense. Okay, let's scroll down for our code, and typically at the bottom, so after all this stuff but before our end sub statement, I'm going to write error, spell it correctly, error handler colon. So just that line there has created a part of our code called error handler. So on error, go to the error handler, and it will leap to this part of the code. So now within this section, we just need to write what we'd like to happen. So what I'm going to do is just display a message box to the user to say that the inventory sheet name has been changed. Please correct, and try again. Okay, so the inventory sheet name has been changed. Please correct and try again. So once jump into this code, it's going to display that message to the user, and then I'm not going to take them back to where they were. We'll see doing that in another video. What I want is the next action to end the procedure. You know, as we saw in a previous one, I can't have this macro continuing. You know, inform the user while we're exiting, and then exit. So, let's have a look at this in action. If I click outside of my code and I click my button, I'm told that the inventory sheet has been changed. Please correct and try again. I click OK, and now our code will not run because there is a mistake on the inventory sheet name. Okay, so let's look at changing it. I'm going to rename my inventory sheet. Let's put that O back in there, and it is now named correctly. Back onto the update sheet, back into the code. Now at the moment, the problem we have is that if there is not an error, therefore it does not go to the error handler, it will carry on with the code, which is brilliant, but at the moment it will still perform this action. So when it's finished, it displays a message box to the user. It will then do the error handler as well. So just to demonstrate that, if I just insert a breakpoint here for a moment, and if I play this code to take us to that part, so I'll play this code, and it updates all the inventory sheet. And if I can F8 from this part, so it then clears the stock, says to the user, oh, I've updated it, yay! And it moves on, and tells the user the inventory sheet needs to be changed. So I don't want to display that message box when everything's working fine. That doesn't make any sense. So let me remove that breakpoint. What we're looking for here is directly before your error handling code, you would have the words exit sub, so that your macro would not enter the error handling section. It would only enter there when specified due to an error. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Right, I'm just going to create some more codes up here. So I believe, let's get back into that. I believe 1008 is mangoes. Let's make up an item, and let's get another one. Let's have 1011, which I believe was blueberries. And let's make a mistake. Y78 error. That's not good news. Let's go back to our editor. Okay, let's me typing on there. Let's go back to our editor. Right, so what I wanted to do here is at the moment, if there's an error, it will jump to that part of code. I've now created a second error. So with that error turned on, what we're going to do is if I set a breakpoint to here to try and save stepping through every little bit, and I'll play part of it and then kind of run from that. As we come back round this loop now onto the second item for blueberries, when it goes in and tries to assign that, we should get an error. So now I'm being told the inventory sheet name has been changed, or needs to be changed, yeah. Well, it has been changed and it needs to be changed. But that's not the problem. The problem is Y78 in delivery. But I've got the same error handler happening here. So, yeah, first of all, I need another error handler to deal with that. But we're going to deal with that in the next video. All we're going to speak about for now is how we can disable that error handler. So, let's tidy this up. No breakpoint. Let's get rid of that. And just after that sheet reference, we're going to put on error go to 0. So the go to 0 will disable that error handler. So it will turn the error handler on. So if there's a problem with the sheet, it will deal with it. And at some point, in our case directly after, disable the error handler. You know, we may have other error handlers to deal with other issues. Otherwise, any error that might occur for the rest of the code will get this same treatment, which is not true. You know, our message box was very specific as to what the problem was. Okay, so in this lesson we have seen how to create an error handler and using like the go to statements to go to a label and error handler, and also go to 0. In the next video we're going to look at handling that issue I just created. So we're going to look at multiple error handlers, and then we can resume parts of our code. Hello and welcome to this lesson on using multiple error handlers. So to expand on the previous lesson where we have the incorrect or changed sheet name of inventory, we now also have an error in the delivery, the way that it's been typed or entered in column C there. So we need one error handler for possible change in sheet name and another one for possible like non-numeric entry of a delivery. Now what we'd like to do is if there is a mistake in any of the entry of delivery here for either item, we would like to move the item or copy it across to maybe column G here, shall we say, and enter it there. So any problem items will be recorded in an area over here.
so that when the procedure is finished, so it will add mangoes in fine, because it's okay, but it will move blueberries over here. And when it's finished, it gives the user the opportunity to consult what they might have done wrong. And then they can always try typing it again and try again. Because there was a mistake, so we're not going to put it in there, and we're going to kind of put it into like a problem list so the user knows. Right, so let's pop into our code and let's have a look at what we've got. So here's our error handler from before, exit sub statement just before it, and here it is where it is within our code. Now, because we're using multiple error handlers now, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a more appropriate, a more meaningful name. So that current error handler, I'm going to say on error, go to, shall I call it changed sheet name. And then down the bottom where error handler is, I will rename it to changed sheet name. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is create another error handler for the kind of mismatched item. There was an error in the way the item was typed. So I'm going to put this below change sheet name. It doesn't really matter what order it goes in there. And I'm going to call it mismatched item, colon after the name of that area. And below that we'll have the code for what to do. Now, because I've got two error handlers now, in between them I should have the exit sub statement, for the same reason that we had the exit sub statement before that error handler from earlier. If there is a mistake in the sheet name, then earlier on in our code where it moves to that sheet name, where are we? Here we go. Go to changed sheet name. When it shoots to the changed sheet name and displays that message, without the exit sub statement, it will continue on and do the mismatched item one. So we need to say, to go to that point, and in this case, exit. Now, you're not always going to put exit sub there. That's not always what you want to do. In this case, it is. The sheet is wrong. Get out of the macro. But in another scenario, you're going to want to resume your macro, but at a particular point, a particular statement. So you'll be using a resume statement there, which we're going to be looking at shortly. I'll resume next or resume a certain point. Sorry, I keep dragging it over there by mistake on a touchpad here of a laptop. Okay, let's have a look at what else we need to be doing. So I've just created an error handler called mismatched item. I guess the next thing to do would be to put that point within our code, and the point is going to be up here, just before the variable assignments, because this is the moment, and we've seen it in the previous lessons, that debug will alert us and go, there's an error, I can't assign this. Delivery contains integer values, but you've typed some text in here, you've typed a string. So we're going to turn on the error handler before that. So on error, go to mismatched item. And directly below that chunk, and I could put it before this if I wanted to be like uber accurate, but I'm going to put it just here. I'm going to put on error, go to 0 to disable that error handler. After that, and before changed sheet name would come into play. Okay, error handler done. Now we've got to create what it does. So, back to the bottom here. You don't necessarily have to write it in this order. This is just what kind of makes sense to me. First thing I'm going to do is display a message to the user so they know what's going on here. They might not have realised that they've typed an error. In fact, they definitely haven't. Why would they click the button if they knew there was an error? So I'm going to display a message box. Error handling is all about dealing with the issue in the appropriate way and doing it gracefully. So you've got to be able to communicate with the user, let them know what's going on. You don't just say something error 1, 2, 3, 4 and just exit. It's going to have to be making sure your data remains accurate and the users know what's going on at all times. So I'm going to say there was an error with a stock item. Please review and retry. That'll do us. Brilliant. Okay, there was an error. Please review and retry. Okay, after displaying that message, as mentioned, the plan, if I can pop back to our spreadsheet, is to record it here. And if there was another one, here, and if there was another one, here, and so on. So, column G is 7 columns. It's the 7th column of our spreadsheet. Row 1. But I won't know what row to go in. I don't know how many problems there are. In this case, 1. I don't know this. So, we're going to need another variable for that. We're going to need to track that as we go through. Right, so back to the top. Variable assignments. Dim. Problem row num. The problem row number. Let's deal with that R there. And I'm going to say that is as, I'm going to say integer. And then in this bit, I'm going to give it a starting value. Row num equals 1. We'll be starting from row 1. Oops. Third time I've done that. Right, let's scroll to the bottom. Let's start assigning it to it. So, cells object. Row number is problem row num. Currently row 1, but that will increment itself. Or we will make an increment. Comma, column 7. It was the first one. Column G was column 7. Dot value equals the value of the ID, which we have a little bit further up here. Where's our assignments? Here we go. Oopsie daisy. Oh, God, I've got to scroll back up again now. Here we go. So it should be this. Because this was assigning. That's what it's kind of looking for at the moment. Let's move that over. Gotta sing and hum while you do this stuff. Alright, that's okay. Let's take a copy of that line. Let's try and save myself as much hassle, and I know what my typing's like. I'm bound to make a typing mistake. Right, let's get that one in there. So, this is gonna be column 2 and 3. And this is going to be columns 8 and 9. So copy the values from the stock item that's, being currently looked for or updated, and pull them into this problem area that we've kind of sort of decided to use. We'll start from column G, which is 7, and then H and I for kind of 8 and 9. After that, we will need to increment the problem row num. Row num equals problem row num plus 1. Because if there are any other problems, it will need to move to the next row. And then after all of this, at the moment, the next line is n sub. Now that was great with our change sheet name, because if that's not the name of that sheet, get out of the macro. Now, not good enough. There might be other stock items to look for afterwards. So what we need to do is resume our code at a particular point. So I'm going to use the resume statement. And I've got to decide where I want to resume. And there's two options here. You've got resume next. So that would take us back to where we were and resume the next line. So for example, in this case, that would be up here. And it would resume the next line, which would be like over here. So even though there's an issue with it, and it's recorded that there's an issue with it, it will carry on and try and use it. Which clearly doesn't make any sense, because there's an issue with it. So, that's not good enough in this scenario. But resume next is worthwhile knowing. We need to resume at a certain point. So I'm going to make that point. I'm going to say resume. And what shall I call it? I'll call it a next stock item. And then I need to move into my code and position that. And I'm going to position it after the interior loop. So the interior loop, remember, is when it goes to the inventory sheet and it looks for that stock item and does its thing. Now there's no need to do that if there's a problem with it. But I still need to use exterior loop to look at other stock items. So here I'm going to write my next stock item, colon. It's like a bookmark, it's like the name of a point in the code. So the next step would be to go back to the update sheet and that, which is not relevant. I don't think it would have gone anywhere else. And loop back round to the next item. So we've resumed at a certain, particular point of our macro. And I think that is that. Mismatch item, talk to the user, record the problem, increment a no number, resume at the logical place. Change sheet name, tell them what's happened, get out of the macro. So the next point would be to check our handiwork. 2 error handlers. So first of all, let's get back to my sheet. And we've got this issue with the sheet name inventory. So if this works correctly, we should get a message saying inventory sheet's wrong. And it shouldn't do anything. Let's go for it. Boom! Inventory sheet name has been changed. Please correct it. Okay. Boom! Oh yeah, I haven't corrected it yet. Right, let's go correct it. Okay. Corrected. Update sheet. Let's have a note actually. Mangoes 190. Stock level. Blueberries 80. 190, 80. 190, 80. So mangoes has got 20, so it should go to 210. Blueberries shouldn't happen. It should move over here as a recorded item. So, click the button. There was an error with a stock item. Oh no. Please review and retry. Okay, and there it goes. The inventory sheet has been updated. So blueberries has been recorded over here as the issue. And our information cleared. So look at inventory. Aussie blueberries was not updated. 210. Mangroves was. So our code has been clever enough to look through potentially lots of items, updating all of them apart from when it came across a mismatched data problem. So it's recorded it in this little kind of problem area to be reviewed afterwards. And it's told the user that that was the case. So there's multiple error handlers. You can have as many error handlers as needed within your code, and it's important that in some way we deal with these errors before we kind of ship this out for real-time use. Okay, in the next video we're going to start looking at another way that we could tweak this macro and run it by looking at the object.
Hello and welcome to this lesson where we start to look at using the object, or the ERR object in Excel VBA, so that this can assist us with handling our errors. Now, working on the same errors that we have been during this part of the course with our wrongly named inventory sheet and our
non-numeric entry in the delivery cell there. At the moment, we have in our code our two on-error go-to statements, which is handling it quite nicely. But we're not actually being specific about what error occurs. This is all because we kind of know what's coming. What we want to do is we're going to try and target the specific types of error more precisely. And each runtime error has an associated number with it. So for example, if I comment out the on error go to changed sheet name statements here so they don't occur, and if I switch back to the spreadsheet and press our button to run the macro, I will instead get the actual runtime error. So the runtime error for the example of the changed sheet name here, or the subscript out of range runtime error, is number 9. So number 9 is the number, subscript out of range is its description. And every runtime error has a number and a description. And you can find these on the web. If you Google runtime error, a list, you can find these. Now, how worthwhile that is another story, because as you can see here, we can find the number as they come up within our code and as we're testing it. But you can find yourself a list of all these numbers if you're interested. What we're interested in right now though is during our code in the error handling section, we want to test to see if the error was number 9, and if it is, take a particular course of action. So rather than just saying if an error occurs here, we're being very targeted again if this particular error occurs. Okay, so let's end that for a moment. I don't need to debug it, I know what's going on. Let's get back into my code. Take then comments out. Okay, and what we're going to do is I'm just going to scroll down to where our error handling section is, and I've got the changed sheet name here and then the mismatched item one here. And I'm just going to rename changed sheet name to error handler. So I'm creating an error handling section, very commonly called the error handler, but you can call it whatever you wish. That's not important. And I'm going to get rid of this mismatched one, because they're all going within one error handler now. But the difference is that within the error handler, we are going to write an if function, an if statement to test what type of error occurred. So the first one here being the one of changed sheet name, or error number 9, subscript out of range. So I'm going to say if err dot, and then we're going to load of properties and methods regarding the object, or the err object. I'm going for number. If the number of the runtime error equals 9, then, so if it was a subscript out of range error, then display this message and exit sub. Else if err.number equals 13, now I didn't display this one, but this mismatched item runtime error is number 13, then say there was an error with a stock item, and do the stuff that we'd mentioned in a previous video. Resume next, and after that I'll have end if. So I've created one error handling section rather than wrote many go-to statements, and we're looking at using the object here to test what type of runtime error it was, so we can take a different course of action. Now scrolling back up to where the go-to statements are, the on error statements, I'm now going to change the first one that appears, which is this mismatched item one. I'm going to say on error go to error handler, as I've now renamed it to the error handler. I won't need these lines anymore. On error go to 0, don't need to disable it. On error go to change sheet name, that doesn't exist. So I've just wrapped it all in one on error statement. So if anything happens within this list, go to the error handler and start testing what type of error occurred, different course of action for each one. Disable it at this point, and on we go. So hopefully this will tackle the errors just like we have been, but in a slightly different approach, giving an example of the ERR object. So if I close this down and have a look at our code, inventory is spelt incorrectly, so I should still get the message box saying that the inventory sheet has been changed and needs to be corrected. So our test of error number 9 seems to be working fine. If I rename inventory, let's put that O back in. Here we go, it's spelt correctly. Go to update and run it. And now we're getting the check on the stock item. So inventory has been accepted. It's realised the error is number 13 now. So it moves blueberries into the area and updates it as so for review. So that is just another example of testing for errors that you may decide to use or you may come across as you use other people's code. The advantage there being the ability to test the specific type of runtime error and target them with different actions for each. Hello and welcome to this lesson on anticipating error messages. And what I mean by this is the way we've handled the errors so far have been using proper error handling techniques, using things like the ERR object, the on error statement, and creating these error handlers. But I don't want us to kind of overlook the features that we have in Excel that can handle this before our VBA even becomes into play, but also some things we can do in VBA as well, regardless of the on error statement when it comes to checking for things. So first of all, a quick fire couple of things we can do in Excel. You know, this is not meant to be an Excel course in that means. We're meant to focus on the VBA. You can check out the superhero course for this kind of stuff. But, you know, the issue with the naming of the inventory sheet, one way we could deal with that in Excel would be our workbook protection on our review tab. You know, if we had protected the workbook, then nobody would be able to change the name of the sheet in the first place. So that may be a way around that issue ever happening, and then we wouldn't have to check for the error. Now, I'm not saying that this is right or wrong, because protecting a workbook and protecting the structure of it protects the whole structure. Therefore, people can't do anything, not just rename, but they can't insert or, you know, move sheets or anything like that either. So maybe that's too much. As I say, it's not for me to say. It's showing other possibilities that we could handle these anticipated issues. I'm just going to switch that back off. See, I'm not using a password there either, so somebody could potentially get around that. Okay, so that's protecting the workbook to handle the sheet issue that we had. What I might actually do is I might rename that sheet and I'm going to protect that workbook. Let's pretend that I've gone ahead with that. That seems like a good idea. That will stop the issue. Now, another one we can do in this regards, with regards to the non-numeric entry and delivery, I'm just going to select a bunch of cells, not being too accurate here. Could select the whole column, could select 50, we never get more than 50 orders. Let's just select them 4 for an example. And we've got data validation. So this is a tool created to validate data on entry. So this will hopefully detect non-numeric entries before it even gets to the VBA side. So I could click my data validation button, for example, run it on a whole number, saying that a number has to be entered greater than 0. This will prevent the possibility of negative entries, prevent the possibility of text entries. So that now if I type 6, it's okay,
But if I type T6, that is not okay. It will not allow that entry, therefore it doesn't get to the point of our code. Now it hasn't checked this one because it only checks them on entry, and that wouldn't be there when we set this up. Just in case you're wondering, oh, I didn't deal with that one. Well, it wouldn't do because it's already there. Now I'm just going to remove that data validation, selecting the cells, back into it and clear. So this is not a full-on explanation of the data validation techniques or workbook protection techniques. It's more of a reminder really about what we have in Excel, which when people start getting into macros, they very easily overlook stuff we could do in Excel first, and they're writing code for it. You know, and that's great, but it might not be the most logical thing to do, but maybe we could handle it on the spreadsheet itself, via conditional formatting, data validation, protecting cells. You know, there's different things we can do here as well. Now let's go back to our VBA code, because I wanted to show one in here as well. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of our error handler. Let's get rid of this on error go to statement. All error handlers are going. Scroll to the bottom, get rid of our error handlers. I'm getting rid of this sheet changed one because I've applied workbook protection to handle that. So that's going. This is going. And so the end if statement. And this code, this chunk of code that we've been using to deal with, actually that exit sub there can go as well. This chunk of code that we've been using to deal with the issue with non-numeric entries, I'm going to cut and I'm going to move to higher up in this spreadsheet, where there's a way around handling that. We're going to put in an if statement that's going to target the entry of non-numeric entries. So let me paste that code in first of all. And in this part of our code, we're going to put an if statement and use an inbuilt VBA function called isNumeric. So we're going to use this inbuilt VBA function to target non-numeric entries, or numeric entries in this case. Now if you've used information functions in Excel before, it's the same as them. You know, like things like isNumber, isBlank, isError. We have the equivalents in VBA, and instead of isNumber, in VBA it's known as isNumeric. So I'm going to ask if cells I, 3, which is our delivery number, that's our delivery cell, dot value equals false. So I'm going to say, if you check to see if that's a number and it's not, if it comes back false, if isNumeric equals false, then do these statements, display a message to the user, move the code. I'm going to change that resume line to go to next doc item, end if. So just to recap, I'm not saying this is a better solution or anything. It's showing alternatives around the error trapping that we've been focusing on this section, about other inbuilt functions and other Excel features that we could use to handle these potential problems. So here we've got this isNumeric function being used in an if statement. Let's finish this by closing this down and checking this out. So I know I can't rename that sheet anymore because of the workbook protection. And if I run this code now with that issue in there, I'm still getting this message box and it's handling it the same way that it was in our previous lessons. We've just decided to target that issue using a different approach, using the isNumeric function and an if statement as opposed to the on error statements. Okay, and that concludes this error trapping section.